Hello, I'm back to do a quick reading from the University of Metaphysics coursework on the topic of transference and countertransference. So here we go.
Things took a very unexpected turn when Keke Palmer was speaking at a panel for her podcast, Baby, This is Keke Palmer, during South by Southwest.
Yes, you need to get security.
She wants to say yes. She wants to say yes. I'm sorry.
She's just like, I try to just handle it very, very gently because, a person's mentality is fragile. And so this, again, is from the University of Metaphysics coursework material, specifically from the master's level coursework. I haven't done a video from this one in a while, particularly just because towards the end of it, it all becomes very specific to having a metaphysical practice and basically how to run your business, how to get clients, how to make sure that you're presenting yourself and representing your practice. Like basically the business level coursework that you would receive applied to having a spiritual practice, being a metaphysical practitioner. That being said, there was a part that I did find interesting that you don't get in the secular teaching. So that's why this is a cool way to go through curriculum that is from University of Metaphysics, specifically because we get different guidance and different direction that you wouldn't get. So particularly on this topic of transference and countertransference, I think actually maybe you would probably get this in a psychology degree, but without further ado, I'll just share the screen to show what we're talking about here. And so this is talking about specifically if you want to get into the field of pastoral psychology, if you wanted to counsel people once you finish the curriculum. This is one of the little sections that's kind of basically warning you of a thing that you might encounter and something to keep in mind, which I thought had broader applications than to just this counselor-patient dynamic, but we'll get into the gist of it first. All right, so transference. If a counselor is competent, keyword, if they are competent, and sometimes even if they're not, transference can occur. Transference means that the counselor becomes a symbol to the individual seeking help. The symbol in the mind of the client generally represents, and it's in this yellow ribbon across the bottom here, that symbol generally represents wisdom, strength, self-mastery, understanding, insight, and healing. It could be a whole host of things, but this is generally what that person becomes a symbol of, because obviously they're in that role of providing guidance to another person. Continuing on, most counselors cannot in reality live up to this image their clients have of them. It's an exaggeration in the client's mind of the counselor's virtues and powers. So we see that the clients tend to have a quote-unquote superhero symbolic image of the counselor in their mind. Let's now create a hypothetical example to show what occurs in transference. And this is the scenario. Mrs. X is having marital problems and decides to see a counselor. Her image of her husband is not at a high point. He doesn't understand her and seems indifferent to the notion of talking things out and or paying attention to her needs. How different things are when she visits a counselor. So the counselor is sympathetic to her plight, takes a non-judgmental posture, which may be quite unlike the treatment that she's receiving at home. She finds that she can communicate with the counselor on levels that she cannot with her own husband. She bares her soul, revealing confidences to the counselor that she cannot perhaps tell even close friends. Very common in that dynamic. She knows that the counselor will keep all disclosures confidential, establishing that bond and that trust with someone that you think is, where you can really be yourself, right? Or if you know that that's protected, it can create this dynamic that we're talking about that creates or sets the stage for transference. After a while, she tends to forget that the counselor is getting paid to listen to her while her husband earns a living elsewhere, right? So the dynamic is literally set up so that the person gets what they're not getting from elsewhere. And this could be, obviously, this is just one example, hypothetical. It could be anyone, and in reverse, the roles, it happens as well with male patients with female counselors as well in this same way, or in work dynamics and other things that we're going to touch on briefly, why I thought that this was an important section and distinction to keep in mind just in general as you're going through life too, even as you look to other people to get advice. It's always a critical thing of whoever you're setting up and projecting. So part of transference also has the other leg of projection. They seem to go hand in hand, but projection is more so about like you're projecting your own actions, thoughts, and feelings and behaviors onto another person, and who may not even be actually displaying them or possessing them. And transference is more so like you're taking on these characteristics and you're putting them onto a person based on some other dynamic. And this, how Leon Masters discusses it, it's a little bit more like you're projecting godlike and Christ-like qualities of being, basically pedestalizing a person because they are your guru or your teacher, your counselor. And so in this teaching where it's building people up so that they can have a metaphysical practice, if they so choose to be an active practitioner after the studies, saying, hey, caution, make sure that you don't engage or fall victim to this kind of dynamic that's very easy to fall into. So anyways, it goes on to say, like, they lose track of the fact that this person is actually in that role to be all these perfected things to you because that's their role. They're not acting as, your spouse. They're not your partner. They're not in your life every day. And sometimes they're, your professional, the professional nature of the exchange requires that you don't cross certain boundaries in terms of, you'll see, like, basically some counselors don't give it to you straight. They won't tell you about yourself. They will just get that check and just tell you what you want to hear. It's kind of like basically a chat GPT counselor that's going to tell you you're right about everything and all that. That does exist out there. And so people, it's funny, I did a BetterHelp one time. It's ridiculously expensive, so I do not do that anymore. I did BetterHelp in the beginning where it has you sign up for basically choosing who you want as a therapist. And it was like you can choose things as far as you can say, do you want someone that pushes back or challenges you, or do you want someone that's agreeable? And I thought that was so funny because I basically left kind of all of the requirements unchecked because I wanted to see without me influencing who I'm going to get. But that's so telling right there that a person can choose to have the kind of person that's going to tell them what they want to hear as part of it. And I think that really what it says on this previous page so simply is like a competent counselor, and which is why one of the things I was interested in with BetterHelp is that it says that you can, like, and I'm not sponsoring, I don't get a paycheck from anybody, and I'm definitely not sponsored by BetterHelp, which is why I'm saying I don't go to them anymore. But the idea of what the advertising was saying, that, oh, you can, choose, basically you can break up with your therapist without any consequences. It's like no harm, no foul. You can move and try someone else as easy as like pushing a button because you have it in your phone. You can just switch up. In my experience, it wasn't that easy because you kind of like are barely starting to get this acquaintance or building that acquaintance, and it's virtual, so it's already a step removed. But they're like these really rapid fire 30-minute sessions, which I did not like, and they are back to back with other people virtually because you can just load it up that way. So you're really trying to connect with a person. So your first 3 or 4 sessions, you're still in that getting to know you phase and probably not getting into anything deep unless you really just want to push, like, hey, this is what I want to talk about, and I need to do it before I spend $5,000 with these weekly charges. And so then once you work I guess is my point, to build that rapport with this person, it's a little bit tricky to just say, oh no, I just want to start over with another person and do that whole thing all over again. So in practice, it really wasn't for me very effective, or very, I like the idea of, yes, you are going to need to continue to shop around essentially for a competent person or the type of person that you need. But also I would say a competent counselor is not one that's going to just tell you what you want to hear to ensure that they keep getting that check. But that unfortunately is kind of how sometimes it plays out. But there are really good ones out there. So that's another thing I guess you would look for or aim to be if you're going to be a counselor. But this says, last here, after just a few consultations, she becomes increasingly dependent upon her counselor. After all, he alone is the person in whom she can confide anything that is troubling her. And that part about becoming increasingly dependent is another downside of therapy. If a person has a monetary interest in you coming back over and over again, it's not so much that they want to heal you or to fix your problem. They want to keep you coming back. And so they give you, whatever carrot dangling that is to keep that dynamic going, because it's going to sustain them. So that's why it's kind of a double-edged sword in traditional counseling relationships. But here, again, and it applies in non-secular, in your pastoral psychology counseling, according to the University of Metaphysics, you still want to be aware of the fact that a person can become increasingly dependent on you. And so your goal, which I like that it said elsewhere in the coursework, was your goal is for the person to stand on their own metaphysical 2 feet. Like you want them to go off and do their own practice and work to understand and understand these teachings or whatever, you're discussing, to understand that they can help themselves to be sustained and fulfilled on their own. You're not the soul edifier, you're not the guru, you're not a Christ figure. And that's where it goes on into in this next page, a little bit about what can happen when you allow that exaggerated role to go unchecked. The symbolic image of the counselor takes on an even more exaggerated role in the patient's mind. The counselor, especially if the sessions are spiritual in nature, moves from a superhero figure in her mind to that of a Christ or godlike being. In other words, the counselor becomes Christ on earth to her. An experienced professional is sensitive to transference accumulation in the client and can see it coming during their sessions. This awareness is based upon certain things the person says or does, which directly or indirectly are of a personal male-female nature. I don't know what that means, really. In her mind, the counselor is like God on earth. The closer she can get to him, the closer she will be to the healing source of all her problems. This need for closeness begins to translate itself in her mind into the need for personal physical contact, in simple terms, to be made love to by her counselor. What? Oh my God. Sorry, y'all. These sessions have now reached a critical stage. Some of this is funny, right? Because, the time and the place in which the coursework is written plays a factor. But it's also still very clear. It's like basically you're allowing a line to be crossed or blurred. If you allow yourself to be propped up as this pedestalized person, the person can get these exaggerated feelings for you. Everybody knows this in this day and age of parasocial relationships. Is also what it's called in a very secular, form of psychology, and basically interactions with this social media time that we're in, where people can follow someone or a celebrity and be, just a direct message away from them, or they're watching their reality TV version of their life, or basically you're fantasizing this closeness, or like you have this actual bond with someone that you haven't really connected with, and it becomes psychologically important to distinguish that, like this is a person that I'm seeing an aspect of, not the whole of that person you're seeing, and you don't have a personal relationship with them, even though you might have bonded with them mentally over their material, over their content, over their career. but it's like there was this, is it Kiki Shepherd? I forget her name, but she, the Aquila and the Bee girl, she was at a talk and some follower showed up there and was like legit trying to propose to her in the middle of the talk. I think I'll try to add a clip if I can find it.
Things took a very unexpected turn when Keke Palmer was speaking at a panel for her podcast, Baby This Is Keke Palmer, during South by Southwest. Everything was going normal while she sat on stage with her collaborators until a fan suddenly walked up to the stage and dropped down on one knee. The man pulled out what looked like a ring box and straight up proposed to Keke in front of the whole audience, leaving the room gagged. Without missing a beat, she politely told the fan she couldn't marry him because she literally does not know him. Eventually, security stepped in and escorted the fan away so the panel could continue. And according to one attendee, the situation was actually brewing before the proposal even happened. They claimed the same guy had already been removed by security earlier, then came back and tried to sit closer to the attendee to get direct access to Keke.
Nah, hey, he was doing some weird shit earlier.
I can't marry you. I don't know you. I'm so sorry. Sorry, sir. Is this a prank?
No. He on some weird shit. Yeah, it's like that, man.
No, okay.
Yes, you need to get security.
She wants to say yes. She wants to say yes.
And she's just like, I try to just handle it very, very gently because, a person's mentality is fragile, and this guy was dead serious. At first people were like laughing along, but it's like, no, it's kind of scary out there. People get access to you in this public frame, and they, have whatever made up in their mind as far as what the outcome should be based on what they've, dramatized in their mind, and it can be a real thing. So Keke Palmer, yeah, I think so. I'll see if I can add that clip. Anyway, so another thing that's interesting about this too is that you'll have people who don't know about metaphysics or the occult in terms of, or if they've been trained to think that that means, oh, it's automatically demonic, or it's automatically this dark evil worship type of thing. And or even these people that are in the Christian groups that are warning against New Age and New Thought, like this Melissa Doherty drives me nuts, and Allie Beth Stuckey type of teachers. They say, oh, the warning is that New Thought makes you think that you're supposed to be God, or you're supposed to be godlike, and that's like, so it's obviously a big no-no. And then you have right here the teaching is saying, like, you need to watch out for this. If you're working with a person and they're starting to project these distortions or illusions onto you that you are, walking on water, you need to cut that off, or you need to, guard against that. Any human being is capable of ignoring that guidance, whether they're your actual pastor in your church or your preacher, your rabbi, whoever that is. That person has this potential to think that they are the thing, right, and not the vessel or the connecting source, the connection to that source. And so it's not like New Thought means that you're telling a person that they should be that. Of course, there are people out there that are crazy that are going to be like, oh yes, I am, and they have these messiah figures. And the idea is you're supposed to be the captain of your ship. You're the discerner, and you need to say, okay, that is not that, or that person is leading me astray by that guidance, whether that's your pastor, your rabbi, your teacher, your preacher, your guru, anyone, right? So I digress. The next move is up to the counselor. He must respond to the situation professionally, or he will find himself caught in what is termed counter-transference. And it says here that counter-transference is basically if the person does not stop that from progressing and allows it to continue, they might also imagine themselves to be in love with the client or wanting more, or also like really embodying that, like, I am this godlike person, and then you get those people that run off into cults and they're worshiping someone who's saying that they're a direct, prophet or speaker of some divine intelligence, and they get these followers and they get addicted to that power, and so it goes. And again, like I was saying, this can be broad into a lot of different dynamics. You can have this not just with the counselor-patient kind of dynamic. It could be with friends. It could be with colleagues in the workplace, actually, like a boss to a employee dynamic. And if the boss, like say, so when I used to work in management, I would always want to build up my employees to help them to grow and move forward. And because that's kind of what it used to be about back in the day when you'd have training and all that stuff. And then I noticed, like, when I was coming up in my first career, it was kind of like they replaced this training and counseling model with, what do you call it, like learning on the job. You're basically doing the stuff, following someone else until you end up learning it, or either you get it or you don't. That's really basically a cosplay for sink or swim. And also, like, I'm not going to be responsible for ensuring that this person can advance, because from the top-down structure of what a lot of corporations are, they don't necessarily want everyone to advance, right? It makes more economical sense for them to have lower paid people at the bottom and more of them than there is to have like leadership or people that are at the top high level. So you keep a few of those. That's how any pyramid is sustained. You have a bigger population at the bottom, and those cogs in the machine are able to support or keep the machine going, right? They're the oil, the grease, the whatever, the mechanics that's actually keeping things going. And it behooves certain persons that want to keep the pyramid that shape to keep those people in their respective roles. And so not training becomes a outpictured result of that. It's like, I'm not going to build you up because I want you to stay where you are. And that's also mirrored in this whole gurudom kind of thing. It's like thinking that I'm better because I've achieved this title or this stature, and my work. And so if I'm the boss and I have these people beneath me and I don't want to train them because I don't want them coming for my spot, then you're not a leader, right? There's a distinction there. You have bosses and then you have leaders. You have mentors, and then you have preachers, basically, or someone that's like, I'm going to talk to you, or a counselor, right? Like we were talking about, those ones that don't necessarily want to heal you because they want you to keep coming back. It's that same kind of thing. So I thought this was interesting, that this transference, or this dynamic of basically inappropriate assignment of wisdom and maturity and self-mastery, can happen in so many relationships. If it's a friend, you have the friend that always gives the advice or lectures the group, and then there's the ones that always receive it. And I'm still guilty of this too, because I don't like to, really, I don't talk like this to many people, because if I feel it's different. If they ask me, then I will, or if we go there, then we can get there. But if it's someone's just like talking to me surface level, or if it's surface level relationship, I'll let it be that. But also, it's not really my role to, preach at a person. But if someone's coming to this information because they're interested in the teachings as well, and I have a little understanding about it, then we can do that. But I prefer the dialogue, right? Of, what do you think? Well, what do I think? Here's what I think. Maybe you should look out for this. Like, I prefer that exchange. But also, if in this environment someone's interested in that and they come to this, then it's like, okay, I'll talk about it. But, a lot of people in my personal life, I do not talk to about metaphysical things at all, because I'm not evangelizing this at all, really. It's more like the coursework is so you can live by it, right? To understand it and see how it can potentially improve your life. And so if it does or it doesn't work, just like if someone's trying out a different faith-based practice and determining how it works in their life, or you're trying out a new exercise program. You're determining if it works or not, but you don't need to go out and tell everybody else you have to do this, and this is what you need to think, and this is what you need to believe, and But in this dynamic of pedestalizing, if you find someone that actually lives for that and loves that and wants you to be subservient, wants you to ask them everything, wants you to stay small so that they can stay big, that's a huge red flag, and that's probably because they're enjoying that counter-transference, because they're, gaining something out of that dynamic, which is typically not beneficial for you. And also, it can also be dangerous for them because you're constantly going to be needing them and depending on them. And the goal is not to stand on one's own 2 feet. So moving on, countertransference, in summary, occurs when the counselor gets caught up in the personal vibrations of the client. What to do? To handle the situation professionally, the counselor must try to keep the counseling sessions in a professional perspective in the client's mind and also in his own if he is experiencing symptoms of countertransference. Let us look to the following suggestions that you as the counselor would consider in order to control and deal with transference and countertransference. Keep an appropriate physical distance from the client. Speak to the client with a professional tone in your voice. So no whispering sweet nothings in their ear. I don't understand how that would happen, but it's here. Schedule appointments so that there's always someone waiting to see you. And this goes back to, like I was saying in the previous sections of this coursework, it talks about like where to set up your metaphysical practice. Do you want to have one in person? Do you want to have like a Sunday service? Do you want to have group sessions? Do you want to have 101? Do you want to have distance healing sessions? Are you like a Reiki practitioner, or are you doing group counseling and all this kind of stuff? Pastoral, so it helps you like pinpoint what kind of practice you want to have. And there's a whole gamut of things. So again, when I say this is interesting, those sections before, but not so much for me to like share here. But I did think this was super interesting because it is more universal. And it applies to a lot of people. So I thought this is good advice regardless of if you're doing this course or not. So it also says limit consultations to 1 hour. You got to respect your time. You got to respect their time. You have people, again, when you set up that dynamic, they're going to want every last second of your day. There's also, if you are a training or a mentor leader type of boss, there's times when I would be like, okay, I've given a little bit too much of myself because someone will just constantly come back. It's again, the goal is for them to stand on their own 2 feet. So I'm not going to constantly coddle or answer all the questions for you. At some point, again, and that other thing I would look for, if you don't take notes, that's a red flag for me. Like if I was a supervisor and I was training someone and they're just sitting there and they're just yeah. And I'm like, this is not, you're going to be back tomorrow asking me how to go through these steps. So I would tell them, oh, did you want to get a notepad or did you want to write this down? I'll wait, or something like that. Or I would screen record once I got to a point where this was happening too much, where it's like, okay, this is taking too much of my time. I need to focus on other things. I would screen record myself walking through these steps so that they can go back to that as a source to do that over and over again. Because you're not going to keep coming back and like yanking on mom's jacket and say, Mom, can you tell me how to tie my shoes again and again? Just like with a kid, you're going to help them, in the beginning. You know that they're not going to get it instantly. So it's not like a one and done. But once they learn to tie their shoes, if they realize that they get a little bit of extra attention from mom, if they run up and they're like, Mom, I can't do it. And you just saw them tie their shoes yesterday and they could do it just fine, but they just want some attention. That's where you got to cut it off, that transference and that counter-transference. It feels good to be that mom that jumps in and helps. This is another dynamic. And, lead your kids. But then when you get to have an adult son that's coming to you to, do his laundry and fold his clothes when he's like 50, we're not living in Italy or those places where that's, a badge of honor. Some cultures it is, but if you don't want that, don't create that. And so that's kind of what's cool as the prevailing message of this. Be professional, but as human as possible. However, don't sit there and talk speaking like some kind of god. Again, that prophesizing, or I was told that, or this is the only way you must do it, or as a leader, like, oh, you have to do it my way. And, if you do it like that, you're going to get burned. Or if let a person, let them walk. Let them thrive. Let them figure it out. It's kind of that sink or swim because you're not going to train them. But then if you're not going to train them and then you're also going to just like criticize them or not ever let them feel like they're doing the right thing, those are those red flags to look out for, because this is not someone who's invested in me growing. This is not someone who is invested in me standing on my own 2 feet. This is someone that wants to keep me in a role that is beneficial to them. This is good for creating awareness both ways, as the person who's looking up to another person or as the person who is counseling or leading or guiding or helping another person as well. If physical advances are made toward you, back off as gracefully and as professionally as you can. Talk it out and explain what has happened, that you have become a symbol in their minds. Make it clear that if they lived with you, I love this one, make it clear that if they lived with you, they would probably find just as much fault with you about which to complain as they do with whomever they're having their current problems. So it's like, I'm not perfect. This is a moment where, you haven't seen how I keep my closet. You haven't seen my clothes everywhere. You don't know. This is a good angle right now. Everything's clean. No, of course my house is spotless. Just kidding. But it's like, hey, you're only getting this much of the view, right? Don't think that you've seen the whole picture. Don't think that this person doesn't have bad days. Don't think that they are any less human than you. So it's about humanizing the situation. And that, again, goes back to this bullet point here, which I love. Be professional, but as human as possible. You're not dictating. And also as a boss, that's another thing. You could be able to say like, oh, I'm not really sure. I don't know the answer to that. Why don't you check with so-and-so who's also in the role? Like, so when I was at UPS, at some point I was working in the sort aisle. And so at the sort aisle, you have to remember all the zip codes of all these states. And it's color-coded them, and it's very intricate. And so there's hundreds of zip codes, hundreds of states, or 50. There's 50 states. But okay, focus. There's international too. So it adds up. But anyways, you're learning these belts because you're getting the package, you're instantly doing it, and you have to be timed to, like, you're moving it along. So I see the package, I see the state, I see the zip code, or I see the country, and blah, 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 and I move it and I put it on the appropriate belt because you're sorting the packages that then go on to be loaded onto trucks. And so you need to be quick. You're moving through these things. I forgot why I brought this up. Oh, okay. So, once you're doing that, and you're doing that every day, it's like muscle memory. Like, oh, this is pink belt. This is white belt. Oh, this, Hawaii, this goes over here. And then also it's split up too by like zip codes. Like the first half of the zip code go here and the second half of the zip code go here. So it's like second nature to you. It's like a reflex when you're doing that every day as the employee working in the sort aisle. You get promoted to supervisor, part-time supervisor. You get promoted to full-time supervisor. And then you're like guiding people. You're overseeing the operation. If something gets jammed, or if something's not working, or if someone has a question, or if someone's getting trained for their first week, you're introducing them to the aisle, but they've already had to pass the test back in the HR training room where they had to do the sort aisle test, and they had to get everything right on the screen a certain number of times to be passing so that then they can get the actual assignment on the sort aisle. This is like TMI, but I'm getting there. So by that time, when you're like the supervisor, you're not hands-on doing the work anymore because it's also union, and people will be like, hey, you're doing the work. You're doing my work. If you touch a package, you can't touch the packages. You can't do the work that's on this unionized employee's work. So you would tell that person to go to, you may not know the answer, I'm saying. You may not know the answer to the person's question. They're like, oh, where does this go? You should, because it's kind of like your job to oversee, but you might not be in the weeds as much because you're not doing it on a daily basis anymore. So that information sort of leaves you. So instead of being that kind of boss that, oh, I know everything and I'm going to micromanage everything, I'm going to control everything, and I don't want you to come to anyone else on this floor but me. If you have a problem, if you have a question, everything must go through me. I make all decisions, and I create this bottleneck that is myself because I want to be the guru, right, of this operation. I want this transference dynamic because it fills my cup for you to be needing me and for me to be godlike, right? This can happen anywhere. It's not just in metaphysics. It's not just in psychology. It's not just in. So that dynamic can create that bottleneck, which I'm talking about. But a good, like it says, a competent counselor, a competent leader, a competent friend, etc., would not create themselves as the be-all, end-all. And they might tell you, or they might be aware, self-aware, that, hey, I'm a little far removed from this, so I might not be the best trainer on this particular thing, whereas this person who is your colleague who does this or just went through the training recently, they might be able to tell you exactly what belt that goes to or exactly what that zip code split was a little bit faster than me. And I have the humility to say, hey, this person might be a better fit to help you with this piece. And I'm okay with letting that go. And I'm okay with that other person being empowered to train you as well. And now that person might be the trainer on my shift. And now I've freed up more of my time so I can oversee the big problems that come up when, like, there's equipment needs to be locked out or something, whatever, you know. I'm freeing up myself to be more productive by empowering others to empower each other. Okay. And so this is, again, like looking for these kinds of things and these kinds of examples in everyday life, friends as well too. Like, I want a friend that understands that I take their advice maybe 75% of the time, 80% of the time I'm asking them for advice, but I don't want them to then project this sense on me that they think that I'm not wise or that I'm not smart or that I cannot think through my own problems. And so then they're constantly talking down to you. You can get that friend that says that, like, oh, why did you do that? Oh, it's because I've empowered you to help me through, you know, situations one too many times, maybe, to where you think that I'm asking you that unsolicited advice thing. This can happen with parents, you know, the list goes on. So I feel like that's a great way why this is like pretty universal. The last section here where it talks about how you can go from Christ to the devil in like 30 seconds flat. Basically, it's saying, beware, the moment you begin to rebuff a client's advances, their image of you can turn from godlike being to the devil on earth. Because you're now the ultimate symbol in their life, yours will be the ultimate rejection and thus the ultimate hurt. The ultimate hurt, quote unquote, turns to the ultimate defense mechanism against that hurt, or the ultimate hostility. Because you've been a Christ-like image in their mind, you have now become the 180-degree opposite, the devil. They will now verbalize whatever negative attributes they can dredge up about you in their imagination. If the client attends group meetings you conduct, watch out. They're going to try and the slander mill, the rumor mill. This can happen again in the workplace. This can happen in friend groups. This can happen in families. So if you allow someone to be that handler in your life where you go to them for everything and then you decide to kind of like shut off the information valve, you're like, I'm not going to tell you every little detail about my life. I'm going to like, I can get through this. Then they're like, oh no, like, you know, they start dragging your name through the dirt. Watch out, it says. Anything disparaging that can be said about you will be voiced. So again, this is why it's just best not to let that happen. When you recognize this, cut it off. You'll simply have to work your way out of this quandary as gracefully and professionally as you can, seeking guidance from the real God within you. Again, this is all about empowering you to be able to say, like, I have the discernment to see where a boundary has been crossed, I'm crossing the line, or they're crossing the line, and to cut it off quickly and cleanly, gracefully and professionally. And if you go along with the client's transference, you will lose your ability to counsel. And you'll soon discover this, as the person will now want to talk increasingly about personal matters pertaining to the two of you rather than sticking to the business of determining the cause of their own problems. A man is not a prophet in his own home is an expression which will now be applicable because you will have established a home stemming from your personal involvement. Carl Jung once said, you have to run the risk of transference to get close enough to the patient to really know and help them. However, most certainly, Jung did not mean for it to go all the way. An experienced counselor can handle the situation in most cases, but even the most experienced can succumb. An inexperienced counselor should never even attempt it. And what we see in a lot of day-to-day is a lot of inexperienced counselors going around and blurring the lines and abusing power, and also people becoming hyper-dependent on people who maybe are not the messiahs that they portray themselves as. So it comes down to your conscience. Now that you've been made aware of what is potentially a common occurrence in counseling, take a long look at yourself. With this knowledge, will you take advantage of those who come to you, placing their trust in you to help them with their problems? Some counselors have indeed exploited the situation, and some psychiatrists have even implied that perhaps it should be a component of psychotherapy. If you don't know any better, that's one thing. But now that you do, it's quite another. Remember, if you are a counselor, you are ethically bound to help people find God and truth within themselves and remove the cause of their problems. Engaging in countertransference can severely damage or completely ruin your ability and effectiveness to accomplish what you are now obligated to do. May God within you give you the strength and wisdom to successfully resolve, or at the very least, minimize your participation in countertransference. I just really thought that was so awesome. And I think that's it. I will leave that one there. I hope that there was something in here again that was useful for you, because for me, I was like, this definitely goes beyond the University of Metaphysics, and so I was delighted to see it and to share it. All right, thanks so much for watching. Take care.